Hi, the following presentation is on women's moral development. It'll be specifically about the theorist Carol Gilligan, and the presentation is done by myself, Tiffany Lefevre-Snyder. So first, a little bit behind the theorist. Carol Gilligan was born on November 28, 1936 in New York City. She received her doctorate degree in social psychology from Harvard University in 1964, and she began teaching at Harvard in 1967. In 1970, Carol became a research assistant for the great theorist of moral development, Lawrence Kohlberg. The primary way that Carol Gilligan is famous is for a book that she published in 1982, and it's titled In a Different Voice. And this book documents her research on women's moral development in order to include the voice of women in moral development theory. And before I describe what that book included, I just want to provide a little bit more background on why she developed the book in the first place. So some background information. This is a quote actually from our Evans text. Prior to the popular and scholarly success of Gilligan's In a Different Voice, human development theorists for the most part did not see women as a group worthy of psychological study. Freud's research had begun a snowball portrayal of women as deviants and set men as the standard by which to judge what was normal. Using a theory based solely on male subjects, Kohlberg had concluded that women were unable to reach the same developmental pinnacle as their male counterparts. Kohlberg later included women as subjects in his research, but continued to find them underdeveloped. Unsatisfied with these thoughts, that's why Gilligan started pursuing her own research. She specifically criticized Kohlberg, his stages of moral development of children, and said that she disagreed that girls on average reached a lower level of moral development than boys did. She also disagreed with him for his specific screening method. She found that his screening method was one that catered more to boys and that he had a much higher male population as subjects in the study than females. So in her book that's challenging Kohlberg, Gilligan proposed ethics of care, and that I will show a graph on the next, a picture on the next slide that provides an illustration of the ethics of care. But the way that she developed these was by, she derived her responses of 29 women facing an abortion decision. She formed the basis for describing, or this formed the basis for describing a developmental sequence that traces progressive differentiations in how women understand and judge conflicts between the self and others. Gilligan contrasted male and female voices by empirical observation to pinpoint a distinction between two modes of thought and to focus a problem of interpretation rather than to represent a generalization about either sex. So she really wasn't trying to make generalizations about men and women. She was just trying to make a distinction between two modes of thought. And so that point becomes important later as well. Gilligan demonstrated that women identify care and responsibility as the moral compass, and that's something that I know we just studied in class. So, but yeah, care and responsibility are the core of Gilligan's findings. And here is an illustration of her stages of ethics of care. I don't have a specific reference for this. I found it online at a very general site, and I found it in lots of different places online, so I wasn't really sure who to give credit for, but if you could download this for yourself in studying, I think it would be very helpful. I know I did. And so these are the different levels and transitions of her stages of ethics of care, and I'll talk about each one here in a second. So for level 1, it's an orientation to individual survival. The individual is considered self-centered and unable to distinguish between necessity and desire. There's individual attempts to protect herself by not pursuing intimate relationships with others. And then in the first transition, it goes from selfishness to responsibility, where she feels a new connection to others and a differentiation between needs and wants. In level 2, there's goodness as self-sacrifice. The individual places greater reliance on others and yearns for social acceptance. This is much different than level 1, as you can see. And then in transition 2, it goes from goodness to truth. The individual questions why she places others' needs above her own. And in level 3, the final level, is the morality of nonviolence. The individual, with a transformed understanding of self, has much respect for the self and individual needs, but also recognizes responsibility and care for others, and selects among competing choices. And I don't know if you can see my reference at the bottom corner of the page, but this is all taken from Gilligan's book In a Different Voice, which was the published book that I looked at was 1993. So the impact of her work. Gilligan pushed connection to others, not universalism and individualism, into the forefront of moral reasoning, and this is very different than Kohlberg. And this here is a copy of her book. As far as the strengths and weaknesses of Gilligan's work, one strength is that it was the first theory to examine moral development void of universalism, and that's kind of what the slide before said. But it also, a strength of it is that it increased understanding of how care and justice shape our roles in student affairs. Because now, gender-related models will help us better serve the majority of our students, which today, as we know, are women. This quote here is taken from Evans. Again, I think my citations in the bottom right-hand corner are kind of being pushed off screen, but that is from Evans. As far as a weakness goes, there is definitely more research needed to follow up on Gilligan's work. And the more research that Evans suggests is there needs to be a variety of, you can say the word epistemological underpinnings and methods are needed to clarify the intricate connection of women and men and their moral and intellectual reasoning. In terms of how this applies to our culturally diverse populations, there's actually a book that's out called The Intercultural Campus, and this is written by Greg Tanica. And he has really started to address how specifically women's moral development in Gilligan's work does apply to diversity in student affairs. And just a few points about this book in diverse populations. Tanica researched numerous student development theories to create a cohesive intercultural theory. He collected data on survey instruments which measured student progress along academic and social constructs. Considering the increasing complexity and diversity of campuses and multiple identifiers such as race, gender, and sexual orientation, Tanica proposed examining each person's subjective position regardless of whether it is the typical norm. So he was really interested in subjective position like Gilligan was as opposed to universalism. He created survey questions which ask students about their campus experience in terms of dominant racial culture, the power play between males and females, and differences in economic class. His vision is headed in the right direction, although the application of the survey tool has not yet been explored to validate his suggestions. So in this way, one way that Gilligan's work is being applied is just in the surveys, the way that we address students, the way that we measure certain things such as their student progress along those academic and social constructs. So he's just really trying to consider, like she did, what other dimensions are out there, whether that's care and responsibility or care and justice or whatever that looks like. He's just really trying to play to a person's subjective position. A little bit more as far as cultural differences between care and justice orientation. According to Evans, research is not consistent in reporting gender-related care and justice orientations in different cultures. It's still common that women, it's still common that women from various cultures primarily adhere to the ethic of care more than men, that's what's considered. However, there's speculations including the historical social roles of women and how that plays into it, women's lack of diverse experience, and limited representation in political power. Those things still need to be considered on how that kind of affects Gilligan's theory. And Evans also goes on to say that we need better and varied theories and models to decipher how moral development might occur differently in different students, what climates on campus we can create to stimulate a diversity of ideas, and how professionals can best assist students from all cultural backgrounds to increase their moral development. Moving from the cultural aspect of this theory and how it applies to higher education practice, for most student affairs professionals, the ethic of care is embedded within their personal value system and translated daily into professional practice. So it's really an attitude, a mindset shift when we consider what Gilligan's work can do for us. As far as a concrete example of how it applies to different realms of student development and student affairs, in counseling. When connections are viewed um, When connections are viewed as strengths in human relationships, both counselors and clients are less likely to view embeddedness in relationships as dependency and are more likely to convey that intimacy and closeness may lead to more complex self-definitions in both men and women. So it does affect in counseling the way we view um, relationships, and when our clients seem to be placing a very high value on those relationships instead of viewing that as dependency, you can start to view that as a good thing, I guess is the best way I can say it, in terms of the fact that intimacy and closeness can actually lead to more complex self-definitions. Another example for residence life training and student leadership, it's suggested that we teach students to understand the differences between justice and care, our student leaders, and then we can help them seek balance in realizing both orientations. This will result in more holistic, effective leadership, because whereas care emphasizes relationships, inclusion, interdependence, which are crucial to teamwork and group cohesion, justice, on the other hand, promotes power, assertiveness, and objectivity, which are also necessary to motivate others and make progress toward common goals. So I'm sure you can see and start to make your own connections in your mind about how student leaders and those involved in residence life could really benefit from understanding and practicing both orientations. Here's a list of my references, and like I said, I apologize that some of them were being cut off from the screen, but if you would like to know more information about Gilligan and women's development, these are some great resources, and also maybe I would encourage you to try to download that slide 7, I'll go back to it real quick, Stages of the Ethics of Care. This really helps me in remembering the different levels and transitions that she talked about. So, thank you.